sun in the palm of my hand.
Spider-Man 2 continues with the philosophy of Spider-Man 1. Make the story about the characters. In this case, the main emphasis is paying the price for leading a double life, continuing the theme from the last one without skipping a beat. Peter can't be with MJ. Harry wants to kill Spider-Man. Aunt May and Peter are still dealing with the death of Uncle Ben. Peter must continue to sacrifice his happiness for the sake of responsibility. And there's a giant octopus man who's terrorizing the city. The theme carries through in the number of subplots dealing with Peter Parker balancing his life, bringing him to his lowest point, which I think is a great piece of drama. Harry hates him because he thinks he's protecting Spider-Man. Mary Jane hates him because he won't go to any of her shows, and because he turned her down in the last film. Mary Jane decides to marry Jameson Jr., or whatever his name is. Aunt May is mad at the fact that Peter was responsible for her husband's death, and that he seemed to run off in the bank sequence.
Peter? Don't leave me.
Oh, that boy of yours is a real hero.
Lastly, he loses his powers. All these subplots work together really well, despite some hiccups, which I'll discuss in further detail, though still, it's all handled better than it is in the next film. One subplot that I didn't feel was handled well, despite being a good idea, was Peter losing his powers. There's no explicit explanation as to why he loses his powers. We instead get a short humorous scene where Peter talks to a doctor about it.
There is one dream where, in my dream, I'm Spider-Man, but I'm losing my powers. I'm climbing a wall, but I keep falling.
Oh. So you're Spider-Man?
In my dream.
So the doctor more or less tells the audience that it's all in Peter's head. I don't like the idea that Peter can subconsciously give up his powers anytime he wants. Then again, it was neat to have Peter's inner conflict featuring Cliff Robertson reprising his role as Uncle Ben. Eventually, the narrative of the film reaches a kind of turning point for Peter, where he starts to resolve these subplots. But the film teases us by only solving two at first. One from Peter's persona, and, after a transition with Jonah Jameson, one from the Spider-Man persona. Peter resolves his issue with his aunt. Something I like about it is that every time I watch this part I get the sense that Aunt May knows that he's Spider-Man, and she's not very subtle about showing it.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble. Spider-Man did that for Henry, and he wonders where he's gone. He needs him.
There eventually reached a point in the comics where it came time for Peter to reveal to his aunt that he was Spider-Man. And when he did, she admitted she knew all along.
Hey, where are all my comic books?
Oh, those dreadful things. I gave those away.
Speaking of Aunt May, though, she's kind of inconsistent in the way she handles supervillains.
Those eyes, those horrible yellow eyes. Shame on you.
J.K. once again gives a great performance as JJJ, being obstinate as ever.
Mr. Jameson, please, isn't there any of these shots you can use? I really need the money.
Miss Brandt?
Yes.
Get me a violin. Oh, here, get a shot of the mayor and his girlfriend. Wife.
Despite being that gruff businessman who keeps calling a hero a menace.
I told you he's not a menace. And I told you I'll take care of him.
Simmons and the writers managed to edge in a small degree of complexity for Jameson, as they did in the last film. Here, sometime after Peter gives up being Spider-Man, we get this delightful scene.
I drove Spider-Man away.
He was the only one who could have stopped Octavius.
Yes. Spider-Man was a hero.
So Jameson does admire Spider-Man.
He was a thief! A criminal! He stole my suit! He's a menace to the entire city! I want Spider-Man!
In the Amazing Spider-Man number 10 comic, Jameson has a little monologue in which he quietly admits to himself that he is jealous of Spider-Man, and wishes he could be as heroic as him. So, the Spider-Man resolution. Peter gets back his powers, which leads to the famous train scene. I find this to be one of the best action sequences in the series, if not the best. Spider-Man has to stop a runaway train caused by Doc Ock.
Any more bright ideas?
I got a few. Yeah.
That's just awesome. I really feel Spidey's life is in as much danger as all the people on the train, thus conveying the sacrificial theme of the film. Afterward, we get this scene.
It's all right.
We won't tell nobody.
I think this is one of the few cases where the series' optimistic view of the public really works. It's certainly better than this one anyway. This scene gives us another boost in the narrative, where we find resolutions or continuations to the other subplots. The big subplot in these films, of course, is the MJ-Peter relationship. It's all about a girl, again. He doesn't want to be with her because he's afraid villains would take advantage, but the thing is, she gets into all kinds of crazy trouble anyway. In fact, at the climax of all three films. When he loses his powers, he then wants her, but she doesn't want him. When he regains his powers, she wants him, but he doesn't want her. Then all is resolved and they end up together in the end. But wait, there's a third film.
Do you want to push me away?
Push you away? Why would I want to push you away? I love you. You're my girlfriend. She's a girl in my class, MJ.
By the way, does anyone else think that MJ is a horrible person for dumping Jameson at the altar? He wasn't a jerk or anything, so no one should feel good at that part. They should have cut out the part at the wedding altogether, and start the scene with MJ at Peter's door. Then again, we wouldn't have gotten this hilarious shot. On another side note regarding MJ and the Raimi series, I understand that the character is very different from her comic book counterpart, and she's here mostly as a damsel in distress, but the reason she works as more than a generic love interest is that she's the love of Peter's life. She provides a channel through which we can understand that being a superhero isn't an easy responsibility. Another is through Harry. While I like the idea of Harry finding out that Peter is Spider-Man, we get something rather strange at the end. His dad shows up and tells him he has to avenge him.
Avenge me! No!
Am I the only one who thinks it's really odd that characters in this film seem to like channeling the dead? Whatever. So we get the exchange. His dad says, "Avenge me!" Harry says, "No!" You couldn't avenge him when you thought he was good, but now that you know he was evil, you will? We have a word where I come from for people like you, dumbass.
I'm leaving for the night, sir.
Fine.
Your father only obsessed over his work.
Good night, Bernard.
The last minor gripe I have with the film is the villain. Not Alfred Molina's performance, I think he's great.
How right you are.
But the way he's written. I frankly think it was both stupid and pointless giving the tentacles AI. AI that's evil. Why does the evil will of the tentacles overcome the doctors? Ironically, the film has so many scenes that make Octavius seem evil on his own. When he nabs Aunt May, he seems to be cruelly enjoying himself.
Hand her over!
Of course.
Easy now!
Butterfingers.
He shows real anger when Peter tries to talk back at him.
One finger on her.
You'll do what?
In fact, before he gets taken over by the tentacles, he has this weird obsession with keeping his experiment active despite all that damage it causes. He also doesn't seem to give a crap when his wife dies. They could have just dropped the AI subplot and the wife, and the film would have worked that much better, as it wouldn't rehash what we saw with Norman Osborn. A thing I can tend to get critical of when it comes to the villains of this series, Harry accepted, is the double mumbo-jumbo thing. On one side of town, a man gets spider powers, and on the other, a man gets 4 extra limbs. And yet another, a man becomes a goblin. It breaches a form of reality which can be a bit of a no-no when it comes to film. But that one kind of gets a pass from me, because the Spider-Man series really is not about what the villains do, but how what they do affects Peter's life. How would a normal man turned superhero balance work, school, family, and heroism? How does he deal with an enemy of one persona who's the friend of the other? How can he be with the love of his life? How does he fight evil geniuses with 8 limbs? This is summed up best in the final scene of the film. That look says it all. Despite being victorious at the end and finally hooking up, MJ knows that Peter being a superhero can only lead to more difficulties between them. That or she read the Spider-Man 3 script. In the end, despite some mostly minor issues, this film is effective in doing what a superhero movie should, focusing on the lives of the characters. In fact, of all the Spider-Man films to date, I'd say it's the most effective at it. It has my favorite scene of the 3 films, and includes some nice subtle and not so subtle touches with the supporting cast. I will say that it's brought down by a number of the minor side characters, and its obvious need to set up the next film. But these elements don't bother me all that much. Spider-Man 2 does what every superhero sequel should, show that there's more to the character than just his origin story.
We sure showed him.
What do you mean, we?
Oh,